The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Manfromleng. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we are continuing with a review of the player cards in the Dunwich Legacy Investigator Expansion for the benefit of new players. This is part 1 of our look at the Mystic cards. We're going to review Alyssa Graham, Clarity of Mind, Rite of Seeking level 0, as well as Rite of Seeking level 4, and Ritual Candles. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Just a quick reminder of how we rate cards here on The Whisper in Darkness. The best of the best get an Elder Sign, while the worst of the worst get an Auto-Fail, and the cards in between get a +1, 0, or Elder Thing respectively. Cards that you build around or are good in one particular deck get a Bless token, while cards we believe are destined for the list of taboos or are simply bad for the game get a Curse token. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. The Arkham Horror LCG community is amazing, and these people have gone above and beyond to bring you content like these player card reviews. If you'd like to support the channel's goals and see your name on this list, head over to patreon.com, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Special thanks to Cole Monroe Chitty for the amazing art that graces the channel, Nicole Fiscus for the new Whisper in Darkness logo that I use for the podcast, and Nate Lost in Time and Space for the intro as well as the overlays. Thank you very much. I couldn't do it without you. Without further ado, let's get started. Welcome back, everyone, to our reviews of the player cards in the Dunwich Legacy Investigator Expansion for the benefit of new players. We're moving on to Mystic in this video. We're going to start off with Alyssa Graham, Speaker to the Dead. She is a 4-cost asset that has a intellect skill icon, ally, and sorcerer trait. You get +1 intellect as a free triggered ability you can exhaust. Alyssa Graham, look at the top card of either the encounter deck or any player deck. You may then add 1 Doom to Alyssa Graham to place the looked at card on the bottom of its deck. She has 1 health and 3 sanity and takes up an ally slot. Now, the adding a Doom to player cards is a theme that has been introduced in the Dunwich Legacy, but it remains probably the most underdeveloped theme, I'd say almost in the game. We really haven't received many cards that add Doom to player cards in play. I suspect that Alyssa and a couple of the other cards in this box made the cut simply because Marie Lambeau was a promo card at this time in the game's history. So she benefits from cards that have Doom in play. So throwing her a bone and giving her a couple cards to play with seemed like a good idea at the time. I kind of feel like in the context of this box, Alyssa and the sort of companion cards, Moonlight Ritual and Blood Pact, are kind of out of place. What do you guys think?
I don't know if they're out of place or if they're underdeveloped in the box. Because they don't really work well with Jim and what Jim is trying to do. And there are certainly cards that we'll review later on that work pretty well with Jim, but yeah, these cards just feel, like you said, a little out of place, and I think it's fair to say that you're right, Manfromleng, and that they were probably thinking of Marie when they initially released these cards. But I think Alyssa's okay. An intellect boost is pretty nice in Mystic, and she's got a decent amount of soak, and even just using the ability to know what's coming from the encounter deck in lower player counts could be pretty good. You know, you can like save your skill cards and save your icons for various skill tests. Or say you know that there's an enemy on top of the encounter deck, you can play your Shriveling or you can play your weapon before the enemy comes down so that you're ready for it. So that's actually pretty nice, but 4 resources is a lot, and Mystics do have some pretty good allies.
Yeah, although at this point, we're in Core and Dunwich. What do we have? We have Arcane Initiate, which also adds a Doom, and Alyssa Graham, and that's it for Mystic allies. Alyssa is okay. I think the one issue Alyssa really has is that she boosts intellect. So if you're playing a Mystic who's going all in on high willpower, and you're investigating with your willpower, using cards that we're going to talk about in a little bit here, then Alyssa's not so great in my opinion. But if you can actually leverage the +1 intellect, which Marie can absolutely do. But I think Jim can as well if you combine her with magnifying glass from the core set, because Jim can take 2 magnifying glasses. So if you're playing Jim and you have a deck and it has Alyssa Graham and magnifying glass, I think she starts working out pretty well. As you mentioned there, being able to look at the top of the encounter deck, especially in solo, that can actually be really good. Getting some sort of encounter deck control. I think we were talking about the same sort of idea with William T. Mallison out of Seeker. So between Alyssa and William T. Mallison, that's 4 cards that can let you kind of scan the encounter deck, which isn't bad, actually. What's also nice is that Alyssa's actionless. Once she's out there, you don't have to invest any more resources or actions into being able to see the top card of the encounter deck, which is pretty good. And I think she has her uses. A little expensive, though.
Yeah, I really like Alyssa when I've played her. That ability to look at the top card of the encounter deck is very valuable if you're playing in solo. It's great to know what's coming. It's also nice that adding the Doom is optional and it's a free triggered ability, so you can play Alyssa and just know what's going to be on the top of the encounter deck for the rest of the game, and you don't have to actually act on that knowledge. Adding a Doom it's a pretty hefty price. You're basically trading that Doom for a turn, or you're trading that encounter card that you don't want to see for a turn. Or say if you look at your own deck and you actually see your base at one of your weaknesses on the top of your deck and you want to send that away. I don't know whether trading a turn for that is worthwhile, but I have used her ability from time to time if I see something on the top of the encounter deck that I'm just not prepared to deal with. I have been willing to make that exchange for a Doom and to send that card away. She does synergize with Moonlight Ritual, which we'll discuss a little bit later, that can remove Doom from a card you have in play. So if you do use Alyssa a few more times than you were hoping for, Moonlight Ritual will clear all that Doom. I think the biggest problem with Alyssa is she is in an awkward spot in this box. If you've just picked up the revised core set and Dunwich, you probably don't have access to Marie, who was published in the Circle Undone campaign, so you don't have access to her. Alyssa doesn't synergize with Agnes, who already has a superior ally in this box in Peter Sylvester. I think you'd have to make a pretty good case to play Alyssa over Peter and Agnes. And Alyssa doesn't really work that well in Jim. I guess you could play her. I guess you could play her in Jim and she would be fine. But I feel like Jim's, I guess his best allies are sort of down the road a ways. So sometimes you end up picking up an off-class ally for Jim. And if you're looking for investigation, Alyssa competes with Dr. Mylan Christopher in Seeker. So you sort of have to decide, do I want to play Dr. Mylan in Daisy or say even in Jim for that +1 intellect and get the resource bonus, or sacrifice that resource bonus for some encounter deck control? And I think resources are always good, and so I think Alyssa ends up sort of on the short end of the stick sometimes.
One thing I would like to point out for the benefit of, especially for the benefit of new players, is Alyssa's effect does not advance the agenda. So, let's say you're in a situation where the advancement threshold for the agenda is 4, and there's already 3 Doom in play. If you activate Alyssa and put a Doom on her, it does not advance the agenda. That's an easy rule to screw up, but that actually can be pretty powerful, because it means that I think we call it the witching hour, when you can just load up on effects that would normally cause Doom, but don't advance the agenda immediately, and then when the Mythos phase happens, then the agenda advances and you clear all those out. You're kind of like getting freebie Doom there, and I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's a good rule of thumb with Alyssa or a card like Blood Pact. If there is only one more Doom, if you only have to add one more Doom before you advance, that's the time to fill your boots and use Alyssa and use Blood Pact and use any other effects that add Doom to cards in play, because that doom isn't going to advance the agenda, and then it's all going to be removed by the time during the next mythos phase. So if you've got fairly long doom thresholds, and there are scenarios that have them, I don't think I would be willing to play around with Alyssa too much in a scenario like Midnight Masks, because that can get out of control pretty quickly if you're not careful. But there are some scenarios in Dunwich that have long enough doom thresholds that you could probably get away with an Alyssa here and there and not pay for it too badly. How would you guys rate Alyssa?
I'm torn between a blessed token and a 0 within the context of just core and Dunwich. +1 intellect is pretty good. Like, even if you're not playing Mylan Christopher, like, having Alyssa and Daisy is still pretty good. Like, that's 6 intellect. And even if you do nothing else other than just look at the top card of the encounter deck, I feel like that's still pretty good in lower player counts. In 3 and 4 player, I feel like that loses a lot of value. So playing Mylan is preferred. You just, like, you don't have enough pieces to manipulate the Doom stuff without having a fuller card pool. So like, you can't really build a deck around it unless you have that card pool. So I think I'm going to give her a 0 just based on the fact you can't really build that deck yet, but +1 intellect is still pretty good.
Yeah, I'm also going to give her a 0, but for actually like different reasons than what Nate said. I think like in the context of Core plus Dunwich, considering that the Mystic's 2 allies, period, are Alyssa and Arcane Initiate, I think she's fine. I think the real caveat there is if you're playing a deck that can actually use that intellect boost, as in not Agnes, I think that actually starts working out. I think the effect on its own is probably not worth the slot. I think the intellect on its own is okay, but I think if you're actually using both effects, then I think it's actually pretty good and worth a 0. I will also like to note is that, ironically enough, her health of 1 is actually an upside. And here's why. It makes it easy to, like, get rid of her when her doom is about to become a problem.
I was debating between a blessed token and a 0 as well. As much as I really like Alyssa, I agree, Nate, that I don't think the deck is there yet. I mean, I think she works better in an investigator like Norman, who has some other encounter deck manipulation tools. At least his replacement cards have some effects that can synergize nicely with Alyssa, and you can get a little bit more of a lock. But yeah, I don't know if the deck is there, whether you would bother playing Alyssa with a combination of Moonlight Ritual or not. I don't know. That's a tough one. I think I'm going to go 0 in the end. I was going to say Bless, but I just don't think she has, and there's enough there to actually build a deck out of it at this point in the card pool. The next card we're going to talk about is Clarity of Mind, 2-cost asset that has a willpower skill icon spell trait, uses 3 charges as an action, spend 1 charge, heal 1 horror from an investigator at your location, and it takes up an arcane slot. I think it's well documented what I think of healing cards like this one. I think at this stage of the game, especially in the Mystic card pool, the fact that this requires an arcane slot is a pretty big knock against it, considering arcane slots are somewhat difficult to come by, and most Mystics prefer to have something to fight with and something to investigate with.
That being said, I get why it's here. It's definitely here for Agnes if you build her like a battle mage and you just want to use that reaction ability as much as possible. And in 3 and 4 player, maybe you have those extra actions to heal off horror off of Agnes so that you can keep using the ability. I get it, but you could be doing so many other things with those actions that you should probably just do those instead.
Yeah. Also, consider how this compares to Smoking Pipe, which in the neutral card slots, like, personally, I'd play Smoking Pipe, like, every time over Clarity of Mind, simply because that arcane slot really hurts. Whereas other healing effects like First Aid from Guardian in the core set, like that doesn't require a slot, and that's kind of important. Yeah, Clarity of Mind. I understand why it's there. There has like the classes. There needs to be a way to heal damage and horror, but it doesn't have to be any good. And Clarity of Mind, it's so slow. It's so slow. It'll only heal 3 horror, and it takes 4 actions to get that 3 horror. Personally, I would take either Smoking Pipe if horror is a problem, or Fearless out of the core set, because it's actionless horror healing. Like I would take either or both of those over this, like any day of the week.
Yeah, and Fearless level 2 is in this box as well, so
Yeah.
if you need to heal 2 horror, Fearless level 2 is a great addition to Agnes. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. It's slow. I understand why it's there, but I honestly don't think I have ever played this card, even in Agnes. There is a level 3 upgrade in the Return to the Dunwich Legacy box. I think it gives you it heals 2 horror instead of 1, I believe. But yeah, this is not a card that I have put in my Mystic decks. How would you guys rate this one?
I'm gonna give it an auto fail. I was debating on an Elder Thing solely based on the artwork, because the artwork is really cool. And when you put it down on the table, you go, "Wow, that's really cool looking." Oh, that's nice. And then you move on. But
So what?
yeah, it's not good. The big issue with this card is a Survivor card that we'll talk about later. I think if that Survivor card didn't exist, this might be a little more appealing to the one investigator it's intended for, but
Yeah.
with that card in this box, yeah, that ain't happening.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm giving an auto fail as well. It's very slow. It takes up a vital slot. Not just a slot, but a vital slot. Yeah, and we already have, like I was saying, you have Fearless and you have Smoking Pipe, both of which I think do the job better.
Well, I was all prepared to be optimistic and give this thing an Elder Thing simply because it actually does do something. So if you do put it in your deck, you would heal a horror. But then Nate mentioned that Peter Sylvester exists, and that reminded me that, yeah, you really don't need this card. If you need to soak some excess horror, Peter will take care of that for you. And so this is it's just too slow. It takes up a slot that at this point in the game's history, you just don't have access to easy arcane slots. That has changed in the past 5 years or so. In fact, lately they seem to be giving away arcane slots like it's going out of style. But at this point, you've got the 2. You could play Book of Shadows to get another, but I'm not buying Book of Shadows to play this card.
That's even slower.
That's even slower and worse. So, yeah, I'm going to give this one an auto fail as well. As much as I would like to be optimistic and say that, sure, there are opportunities to play this. I mean, maybe in an off class. I mean, all of the Dunwich investigators can take this, and they don't have nearly as much pressure on their arcane slots as either Agnes or Jim. So if you're looking for the ability to heal horror, that's available to any of the Dunwich investigators. But honestly, I think you've got way better cards to spend your time and resources on than this one.
I think if it wasn't an action and it was a fast action, like a lightning bolt to exhaust it and spend a charge to heal a horror, then it might be pretty fine. But it's the fact that it's really slow and takes all those actions. Oh.
The next card we're going to talk about is Rite of Seeking, 4-cost asset with an intellect skill icon spell trait. Uses 3 charges. As an action, you can spend 1 charge. Investigate. Investigate using willpower instead of intellect. If you succeed, discover 1 additional clue at this location. If a skull, cultist, tablet, elder thing, or autofail symbol is revealed during this test, after this test resolves, lose all remaining actions and immediately end your turn. And it takes up an arcane slot. Players got a taste of this card in the revised core set, which republished or reprinted the level 2 version of Rite of Seeking. And man, back 5 years ago, this card almost single-handedly revolutionized Mystics. all by itself.
Yeah, giving mystics the ability to use their willpower to investigate is pretty good, apparently.
Kind of vital. I mean, how does Agnes get clues without this? Like flashlight? That's about
Yeah,
it.
she's got to like combo flashlight with perception, and
Yeah,
you're
that's
investing
big.
a lot into those.
So this is kind of a vital card. Like it's kind of a staple. Like if we were to like define what the word staple meant in the terms of card games, this would be pictured.
If you get all three charges to get 2 clues, that's you're talking seeker levels
Yeah.
of clue gathering. Like that is really good for your
Yeah.
resources. That's really good.
Yeah. For cost is pretty expensive though, so you're kind of like it's fairly costed, I would say. What it doesn't do is it doesn't add your intellect boosts, so you don't exactly get to combo with magnifying glass or anything like that. So what this means is that Rite of Seeking, because it's kind of incongruent with what Daisy likes to do, which is stack intellect and investigate a lot. It doesn't exactly like it doesn't synergize with like Daisy, but if you're playing like a Mystic's Mystic like Agnes, then this is like how you investigate, and it's kind of important. It is really nice that the revised core they reprinted the level 2 version, so you get a nice upgrade path in this box from like the level 0 to the level 2 to the level 4. Yeah, they did a
Well,
good job with that.
the level 0 version is also good in Zoe as well. If you're playing Zoe in
Oh, that's
solo.
right, because she has 4 willpower,
Hmm.
doesn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good thing to point out, Nate, is that Zoe does have 4 willpower, and a lot of players like to, especially in solo, incorporate a lot of Mystic cards into Zoe to leverage that high willpower that she's got. I don't have anything to add about this card. I mean, this single-handedly revolutionized Mystic back in the day, and the fact that you get the level 2 version in the revised core, you get this in this box, as well as the level 4 version is fantastic. You're starting off in a much better place than a lot of Mystic players were back in the day. 4 resources is pretty pricey. Unfortunately, Mystics don't receive a lot of their resource discounts until the following set, which just happens to have been released. So if you are able to pick up the
That's right.
Path to Carcosa Investigator expansion, you will get Uncage the Soul, which makes this come down for 1 resource. And I believe David Renfield is also in that box. So you are able to generate some extra resources with him and get a willpower boost to boot. So fortunately, that set has come out already. So that's another good pickup if you are a Mystic player. Now, the prematurely ending your turn is pretty painful. However, you can work around it by simply using this as your last action of your turn, and then it's basically you won't have any issues. That doesn't always work out. Sometimes you have to risk it, but I think in multiplayer I think you have a little more flexibility to take that risk than you do in solo, where it's like every action has to count. And so I will tend to like do something, move to a location, use Rite of Seeking to grab a clue, or some effects like that, just so I don't have to actually use this as my first action and then be like, oh, sad face as I lose the rest of my turn after that. How would we rate this one?
I think this is an easy Elder Sign. Like you were saying, Manfromleng, this card revolutionizes the way that you can play Mystics and high willpower investigators like Zoe. Just a great card.
Yeah, this is another sign. It's kind of a staple. This is how Mystics investigate. You stack up some willpower, play some Holy Rosaries, you play Rite of Seeking, and then here you go. Sweet, you can investigate pretty efficiently too.
Yeah, there was no doubt this one gets an Elder Sign. And if you are playing Mystic, this is probably going in your deck until you can afford either the level 2 version that you got in the revised core set, or the level 4 version, which we're going to take a look at now. Seems appropriate. This one actually costs 5 resources, costs 4 experience points, has 2 intellect, skill icons, spell trait, same number of charges at 3. You can use your willpower to investigate. You get +2 willpower for this. skill test, and if you are successful, you discover 2 additional clues at this location, and it has the same issue that if you draw one of these special tokens, you will immediately end your turn, and it takes up an ally slot. I think this one is good in multiplayer. I don't think I've ever purchased this in solo. It's simply not necessary most of the time. I can actually think of a couple scenarios where I might actually like this in solo, but generally I think this is a multiplayer card.
Yeah, this is nice if you're able to get this before Essex County Express, because that scenario has a lot of locations that have tons of clues on them, and you need to get moving in that scenario.
Oh yeah.
So this is quite nice in that scenario. I think barring that though, if you have the level 2 version, that one will probably do you just fine. You know, I especially with Dunwich being so stingy on XP, I would be cautious about spending 4 of it on one of these, and 5 resources is a lot. That's your whole starting resource pool on one card. And without ways to generate additional resources, which is, I guess, basically just emergency cash at this point, you're not going to be able to play any other assets. So it's just something to bear in mind when playing this card. But 3 clues per action is, whoo, man.
Yeah, that is a lot. Yeah, only in 3 or 4 player would I consider this. One thing that's really good about the level 2 version that came in the revised core is you get that +2 willpower when investigating, which is actually really nice. That's like, don't sleep on that. The extra +2 willpower from the level 2 version can really put you over. It puts Jim up to a 6 without any other boosts. It puts Agnes up to a 7. Yeah, which is really nice. Then you can investigate even 4-shot locations pretty reliably. But this one, it's very powerful, but only if you're gonna actually discover 3 clues. Yeah, which happens in 3 and 4 player a lot.
Yeah, this is one to consider if you're playing multiplayer and one of your primary responsibilities is to discover clues. If, say, you're playing a mystic and you're playing sort of a more flexible role, doing a little bit of damage and discovering a few clues, I don't think you need to spend the experience on this one. You can probably stay with the level 2 one and be quite happy. How would we rate this one?
I'm going to give this one... I'm debating between a bless and a +1, because it's pretty good. Like, in multiplayer, when you play it, it's going to be really good, because chances are there's going to be enough locations for you to effectively use this on. That being said, you got to be playing 3 or 4 player to even consider playing this card. So I'm going to land on a bless token. You play it in 3 and 4 player, and barring that, you're going to do just fine with either the level 2 or the 0 version.
Yeah, I totally see that. In fact, I would go so far to say that you may not even want this in 4 player. Because the problem with 4 player is, if you have this, you spend an action to discover 3 clues, but there's still a clue left. And you don't want to spend another charge of this. So it's like you kind of want another way to get that last clue. You know, and then at that point, you're spending a lot of XP, when you kind of got to spread out your ways of clue getting. But I think in 3 player, this thing is really good, because then you can clear the location. Ooh, as for a rating, though, I think I'm going to say bless on the condition of in 3 player, this is kind of amazing. Elsewhere, I mean, I guess if you have Roland in your group, then there might be some combinations you can do where Roland picks up 1 clue and Agnes picks up the other 3. But that gets very specific, which is why it deserves a bless token.
I think I would have given this one a bless token until I recently played one scenario as a solo player, and I had 3 clues on that location. It was really annoying as a solo player. And suddenly I'm like, oh yeah, there's a solution to this. It's not a solution I would typically consider, but there is a solution in the card pool. So I'm going to end up with +1 on this one. I mean, it's really good. If you're playing multiplayer, I don't think you can go wrong in picking this up. I think if you're playing 4 player, maybe you think a little bit more about whether you want to upgrade to this or not. 3, I think definitely, because you're going to be having 3 and 6 clues at locations, which is going to work out very nicely for you. But I think if you're playing 2 or even solo sometimes, it's nice that this option exists, and with all of the tools that mystics receive, I could see myself spending 4 resources to pick up 1 copy of this just to have it in my back pocket in case I need to get a lot done in 1 turn and go from there. But yeah, I think it is a little more situational than some of the other cards, but I still think it's really good. That brings us to the last card that we're going to take a look at in this video. It is Ritual Candles. It is a 1-cost asset that has a willpower skill icon item trait. As a response, after a skull, cultist, tablet, or elder thing symbol is revealed during a test you are performing, you get +1 skill value for this test, and it takes up a hand slot. I know there are some people who really like this card, Nate.
Yeah, I'm one of them. I like this card. It's cheap. It's an item, if that matters to your deck, or if you have Bob on your team. I honestly think that bonus comes up a lot more often, especially in Mystic, than you think it does. And in that case, you're getting this bonus maybe 2 times a turn sometimes, which is pretty cool. If you're able to build your deck in such a way where you can continuously reveal those symbol tokens, then this gets really good. And Jim wants to actively find skull tokens. So this is quite good in Jim. And there's another card that this combos with really nicely as well. So yeah, I mean, in Mystic, you don't have a lot of competition for your hand slots.
Yeah.
And this is just costed appropriately, I think, that even if you only get this effect once or twice throughout the game, that's pretty worth it, I think.
Yeah, I think the fact that it costs 1, and if you're assuming you're playing a Mystic deck that doesn't really use its hand slots for much else, so which is basically Mystic at this point, then I think Ritual Candles, it works pretty well. I mean, it probably doesn't work so well in Daisy because she has a lot of competition for that hand slot, but Jim, Agnes, yeah, both of them can use this pretty well. Even if you don't lean into it, even if you just put it down, and then every once in a while you get +1 to a skill test. That's pretty good. So it's a fun card.
I am going to disagree. I do not like this card. And it has taken me a long time to figure out why I dislike this card.
Ooh,
and
story
so time. I was doing some math, and I think, the first reason I don't like this card is it doesn't really jive with my play style, because it always feels it's like the 4th asset. So I get my ally down, I get my Rite of Seeking down, I get my Shriveling down, and then I've got Ritual Candles, and by that point, I'm set up, I'm ready to go. So taking the action to play Ritual Candles always sort of feels like it's just 1 step too far, and I just can never bring myself to, I have put this in decks, and I draw it, and I'm and then I just never can bring myself to play it. Mm-hmm. The other reason I don't like this card is because of the math. Conventional wisdom is that if you're taking a skill test, you want to be, generally speaking, 2 up before you pull from the Chaos Bag. If you can do that, on a typical Chaos Bag, you have roughly an 80% chance of success. If you, say, have 15 tokens in the bag, you've got a -3, a -4, and an auto fail that are going to kill you. If you are able to generally be 2 up before the pull, the only time this card matters is if those special tokens are -3s. And so I took a look at Knight of the Zealot and Dunwich Legacy to see how many -3s are in the bag typically, and it was basically 1 token per scenario. And so I feel like, sure, it seems like this card is going to trigger a lot, but if you're able to go 2 up consistently, you're not going to be triggering this card, because most of the Skulls, Cultists, and Tablets are -2s. And occasionally you'll have a -3, so it's actually not doing anything for you. Now, there are those cases where you're not going to be able to go -2 above the pull. So that's when this, if you're unable to do that, then I could see making a case for Ritual Candles. But I think when I'm playing, the tests I care about, I'm going 2 up before the pull. And if I really care about it, if it's a test I can't fail, I'm going 3 or 4 over, in which case Ritual Candles does me absolutely no good, and it's a waste of a resource and an action. Now, I could see a case, I think, for playing this in Gym, because skulls are important to Gym. If you have this in play and you're playing Gym, the skulls become +1s, which helps Jim in those Hail Mary situations when he's 1 down before he has to pull. Suddenly you're essentially doubling your chances of success. So for most investigators, they have, say, I think it works out to be like a 13.3% chance of pulling off a Hail Mary, because there's a +1 and usually an Elder Sign in there that will save them. Jim doubles that to almost 27%. So in those sort of circumstances, I could see playing a copy of this. I think the other sort of knock against this card right now, if you're considering Revised Core and Dunwich, is that there just isn't a lot of Chaos Bag manipulation available. It's like you've got Grotesque Statue, and that's basically it.
Yeah.
So a lot of the cards in Dunwich have this sort of like, well, if you draw a special token, good things happen. But the set doesn't really give you a way to do that consistently. That comes down the road with things like Olive McBride or Jacqueline Fine, stuff like that. So yeah, I've never liked this card. I've rarely, I think I played it a couple times in the beginning and just haven't since. So
okay. There is one point I'd like to make, and I think it synergizes in Agnes. I think it synergizes well with Lucky, because with Lucky, Agnes, if Agnes has both this and Lucky in her deck, then she can kind of like draw a really bad symbol token but Ritual Candles might put her to a point where Lucky can then put her over into pass range. So I think there's something to be said about that. But for the most part, yeah, I totally see what you're saying about bag mathematics and whether this is going to be the +1 that pushes you over from failure to passing. Something else that's worth noting, it's a little less reliable, but you can play 2 of these. It uses both your hand slots, but you can play 2.
That's true.
And Mystics aren't really doing anything else with those hand slots, right? Like, if you're going to go with Rite of Seeking to investigate, you probably don't need Flashlight. And unless your off class helps you investigate and you happen to need your hand slots for that, then okay. But like, Ritual Candles kind of stands uncontested currently as far as Mystic hand slot cards go. And I think another point to make too is that this card gets a lot better in hard, where there's a lot of -3s, and it's also good in circumstances where those special symbols reveal other tokens. So you get a +1 and then you reveal another token, and that could be, that throws the math off entirely. So
yeah, that's right, because this you don't exhaust it. So this can sometimes trigger multiple times in a single skill test if you're drawing multiple tokens. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think the synergies do get more pronounced later on. So I think we're all right, but for different reasons.
I also have a heavy bias because I really like Jacqueline, and this card is really good in Jacqueline.
Yeah, because you have some actual control over like what you're drawing and how many tokens you're drawing and which tokens you're resolving. Yeah, and then what Mr. Lang is saying is, if you're playing like Jim or Agnes, you really don't have a lot of you can't exactly draw 5 tokens and choose one to reveal and thus synergize with this. Yeah, this is an interesting one. That being said, it's cheap. So at least if it doesn't fire, you haven't spent very much and it soaks up Crypt Chill.
I think it comes at like a low enough opportunity cost in most Mystic decks currently that it's probably fine to play. But I totally get where you're coming from, Manfromleng. Like, as far as essential assets go for Mystics, this is not one of them. If you're playing solo, you don't need this card, especially in Agnes. I think she just has 5 willpower, and you just kind of brute force everything with that 5 willpower. But
Yeah.
Once you start playing hard, I found that this card gets a lot better in hard because
Yeah,
there's
because
so
those
many
symbol tokens get nastier in hard. That's right, because you flip that scenario card over, and then, whoa, they start getting rough.
So how would we rate this one?
I think within the context of just core and Dunwich, like you said, there isn't enough there to really get maximum benefit out of ritual candles. So I'm gonna give it a 0 because I think it's fine.
Yeah.
You're not really sacrificing a lot putting this in your deck. If you were, I'd give this an elder thing, but I think as it stands, it's fine. But once you develop your card pool, you have Jacqueline and you have the cards in her starter deck and you have Dark Prophecy and all of McBride, then this card really can do some cool things for you.
Yeah, a 0 sounds about right because I think as cards go, like I think you can do a lot worse when you have a small card pool and you're trying to look for that 37th and 38th, not 37th, 38th, the like 27th and 28th card to go in your deck. I think these do the job pretty well. Mr. Lang, you seem like a guy who would take Defiance over this, which is coming up later in our review series.
Oh, I don't like Defiance either. So
But you still sound like a guy. Defiance is probably more up your alley than Ritual Candles,
yeah.
is what I'm getting at. Yeah. So I'm gonna give this a 0 because I think you could do a lot worse, and at least like it might help you out, and it's not bad.
I'm going to give this one a blessed token. I would consider playing a copy in Gym.
Okay.
I would also consider playing a copy maybe if you're just starting out in the game and you're starting to play Mystic, and if you don't have a good grip on bag probabilities and the odds of drawing certain chaos tokens and stuff like that, like learning how to sort of game the bag is something that only comes with experience and having a chance to play. And I mean, you can sit down and type it all into a hyper geometric calculator and figure it all out for yourself, but that's usually a step too far, even for me a lot of the time. So I just sort of look at this and it just doesn't fit with my play style, but I could see playing a copy in Gym just to, get a couple +1s, especially if you're playing in later campaigns where you've got 3 skulls in the bag.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I could also see a case for really going all in on this and playing the 2 copies so you're getting +2, because I think, I can't do the math off the top of my head, but it would change the math substantially on some of those tokens. Yeah. I think that you could then get away with not going 2 over all the time and say, okay, I can take tests at, maybe even or at +1 because Ritual Candles is going to bail me out more often than not. But that's, I think, more math than I'm willing to do this morning. So I just sort of look at it and say, well, I'm going +2 most of the time, unless these symbols are -3s. It's not going to affect me that much. And when I looked at the scenarios, there weren't a lot of -3s. There were some, but a lot of them are like, if X and Y has happened, then this token is a -3. Otherwise, it's a 0. So yeah, there's differing opinions on this one. Personally, I'd only play 1 copy and maybe in Gym, but your mileage may vary, and you may want to play 2 copies for +2. That's going to do it for part 1 of our look at the Mystic cards in the Dunwich Legacy Investigator Expansion. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. Any final thoughts?
I think overall this is a pretty solid few cards for Mystic. I mean, Clarity of Mind is pretty bleh, but Rite of Seeking, Alyssa Graham, Ritual Candles, those are pretty solid cards.
Yeah, we got a nice range. We have an absolute staple in Rite of Seeking, and then we have a powerhouse in Rite of Seeking level 4 in the right play group, and then we had like some as in Ritual Candles and Alyssa, and then we had Clarity of Mind. So we had the whole range this time.
Yeah, I don't think. We talked about this before, but Rite of Seeking really revolutionized Mystic and is a very important card. Before this, Agnes basically had Flashlight, which is not good, not that great for her. now she could turn her willpower into her advantage. And this is really where you start to see Mystic decks basically stacking willpower as high as they can go, so they can just leverage cards like Rite of Seeking and Shriveling, or the upgrades for Shriveling, what we'll look at later. I guess this also sort of leads to a problem with Mystic in that they do become a little slow, because they do have to rely so heavily on those cards to actually do the heavy lifting for them. So if you're playing a scenario and you don't draw your Rite of Seeking or your Shriveling, then your ability to investigate and fight are quite limited. And so Mystics can be a little slow to get off the mark, which, if you're playing solo, there is a chance you can get caught out and end up having a very short game indeed.
That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromleng@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.